Hey, everybody. It is that time of the month. It's that time of the month. It is time for another take of the Music Nerds Record Club. We're just a group of friends who semi-formally gather on the interwebs from all over the continent to talk about our favorite obsession, which is listening to music. We pick an album a month, and that choice rotates. And then we talk about our current listening obsessions. On tonight's October episode, number 10, it's me, teacher on the radio from Cookeville, over at www.teacherontheradio.com, from Charlotte, North Carolina, and surviving all the hurricanes and making it through. Okay, we have Scott Greenberg of the Debts No Honest Man Can Pay podcast. We have Amy Rock out of Nashville, Tennessee. Joe, spelling his name backwards, out of up the river from New York City. And from popmatters.com, we have tonight's curator and album chooser, Rick Quinn, joining us from Nashville, Tennessee. The way this works is each member of the cast gets a turn to speak. With extra time we have at the end of each half an hour segment, we can regroup and comment on each other's comments if time allows. Most participants try to limit their comments to about 5 minutes per section. And we have a little bit of extra since one of our dear friends, Gus Creeder from the staff of the Oracle newspaper at Tennessee Tech, their resident music critic, is off this month. But I think in November, Amy will be picking our album. And then in December, we'll take the month off and do our annual best of 2024. Everyone is so excited for that episode. Tonight, we're doing a 2003 album by the organization called Death Cab for Cutie. The name of the album is Transatlanticism, and I'm going to turn it over to our fearless curator of the day, and we'll all come back at the appointed times to share our take on this wonderful album. So let's give it up for Rick Quinn, and he'll take us from there.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really excited to talk about this album with you all this evening. When Andrew and I were talking recently, he asked me how I came upon this album and how I came to choose it for our monthly discussion. My earliest recollection of encountering this album and this group came from NPR's All Songs Considered list of the 10 best CDs. I think we remember those, of 2003 that I had read over in order to discover some new music. It was the first time that I had been introduced to Death Cab for Cutie's Transatlanticism, and also to the White Stripes classic album, Elephant. It was my first intro to both of those groups. I don't want to pose as cooler than I am, which is not very cool at all, and pretend to be an early adopter of either band. In fact, full confession, I've never listened to any of Death Cab's earlier albums on the Barsic label that come before Transatlanticism, but have enjoyed subsequent albums like Plans and Narrow Stairs. Last year, I reviewed their most recent album, Asphalt Meadows, for Pop Matters. I wanted to pick a more recent album than I had chosen earlier, although this one is 20 years old. But mainly, I wanted to choose the album because I love it. It appeals to the lyrics nerd in me that is shaken by Ben Gibbard's observational musings that lead into emotional vistas. The hopeless romantic in me is wrecked by the yearning and seemingly unbridgeable distance that can arise between two people despite their physical proximity. This is one of those albums that hurts so good. And more recently, multiple listens have deepened my appreciation of guitarist and producer Chris Wallace's production genius in making this album's music equal parts lush, enveloping, jarring, and uneasy. This is the climatic musical landscape at odds with the anticlimactic numbness of the return of the same. There are builds and swells and industrial noise, images and scenes, rising action, but very little resolution. It's a post-breakup album with a wounded and probably unreliable narrator. It isn't until the closing song, Lack of Color, that Gibbard confesses that this is now fact and not fiction for the first time in years, as he talks about the way in which our retina or our brain takes the upside down images that our retina receives and puts them right. It's a meditation on perception and the uneasiness of it. I've got so much to say about this album that what I want to do is just highlight a couple of things and then turn it over to my colleagues and just sort of dig into what they have to say. And maybe if there's time to circle back on some things, I will. But if not, no big deal. I love the jarring way this album opens up with the song "The New Year," white noise leaning into guitar chords and minimalist drum fills, and then Gibbard's declarations of a sense of staleness, of sameness, of no new possibility. This is the new year, and I don't feel any different. Um, I love the way in which many times there are no real transitions between songs. One will bleed into the other, or will have some industrial or white noise that leads into that. I think one of the things that attracted me and struck me about this record is the age in which I encountered it. There's about a 10-year gap between Ben Gibbard's and myself, so that when he was writing this, he was at the end of his 20s, and I was moving into out of my 30s, and so the single, "The Sound of Settling," which is pace and tempo of that song, is in stark contrast to the melancholy and loss of the ground it traverses. As he was looking at the end of his 20s here, and ironically leaning into an image of lost youth, I was at the end of my 30s and well aware of the sound of settling and the yearning and emotional deserts that emerge when nostalgia shifts to what could have been. There's so much more I could say, but I'm going to stop early and turn it over to my colleagues so we can dig into the richness of their insights.
Rick Quinn, everyone, thank you so much for bringing this record to my attention. Very rarely in this podcast experience with friends who I share so much in common, very rarely have I had any in-depth familiarity at all with the records that we've been doing. And sometimes we've taken on a record that I've never listened to ever, sometimes an artist that I've not ever heard of. And this hobby is so exciting because this world is so vast. The streams are so wide, so deep, so fast moving, that there's just so much goodness to discover. When I unpacked this record in my few listens that I've had time to give it, I immediately noticed the shimmering audio that felt very much like the aughts. This sounds to me like the aughts, and it sounds like a rock album of the aughts that has been dipped into the gauze of the 21st century. And so adjacent albums or artists that might be similar to me might be Wilco or later even Band of Horses. But there's definitely this sense of that there is a wall of sound, that there's a guitar-based, rock-based situation here that you can fall into. It even reminds me of some of the more denser shoegazy type hard rock albums, post-rock albums that we're experiencing in the 2010s and the 2020s. But this very much feels like an album for the 2000s when they said rock was dead. Reminds me a little bit of Interpol and editors and groups like that as well. And rock very much came kicking back in the early 2000s. Something else that is happening for me with this record that Rick and I talked about in our pregame the other day was the lyrics and Ben Gibbard's turn of phrase. And so it's getting used a lot now to talk about writers as their literary songwriters. And we've often talked about singer-songwriters and lyricists as poets, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But I mean, it's when you get into the actual words, you can kind of tell the ones that fit that there's just an eloquence and a denseness to the line of the song that really justifies this. And so I really started to get in to Gibbard based on this idea of him as a literary songwriter. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that he's a bit of a literary person himself. And because my first introduction to Ben Gibbard was not through Death Cab for Cutie. No. I was introduced to him in a collaboration that he had with Jay Farrar of Sunvolt and previously of Uncle Tupelo, the group that split up. Uncle Tupelo split up into two threads. The other thread, of course, being Jeff Tweedy's band Wilco. sometime around 2010 or something like that, Ben Gibbard and Jay Farrar collaborated on an album based on the writings of Jack Kerouac, specifically a very desperate and dark book called Big Sur, where Kerouac leaves the San Francisco Bay Area to go retreat. And I think he goes to dry out, but he's basically drunk the entire time. And it's a book of meditation, but also a book of desperation of somebody who is an alcoholic but not willing to quit using alcohol. It's a great book. It's a thin, easy read book. And the album, I think the album by Gibbard and Farrar might even be better than Kerouac's book, Big Sur. So this was a very exciting record for me to hear. And there's one song in particular that spoke out to me on this for those words, and also for the emotional heft that I believe that this song carried for me. It was towards the end of the record, and the name of the song is "We Looked Like Giants." And God bless the daylight, the sugary smell of springtime, remembering when you were mine in a still suburban town, when every Thursday I'd brave those mountain passes and you'd skip your early classes. And it's a romance, and it's also like a problematic romance. And then there's this reference, intertextual reference towards the end of the song, and the bridge says, "Do you remember the JAMC?" And I had to look it up. I'm like, what does he mean, the JAMC? It's like, do you remember the Jesus and Mary chain? And Ben Gibbard lists this as one of his favorite songs, one of his top 30. In an article I found, Gibbard said this is one of his top 30 songs he's ever put out as Death Cab for Cutie. And he said he laughed that a lot of his listeners had no idea who the Jesus and Mary chain were. I recommend this song very, very much. It's been great to share just a little bit of my take. And my eyes, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the camera because I've got all these notes on different screens and pieces of paper and scraps of reality all around my room. And I had to look to see who I get to pass it to next. My colleague, who definitely is excited about today, they were telling us all for the last several days how excited they were about tonight. So turning it over from Nashville, Tennessee, Amy Rock.
Yay. Yeah, I am so excited because of the other albums that have been recommended, this is one that I have a deep history with. This album came out when I was in high school. This album and Plans, Death Cab for Cutie's following album were part of the soundtrack of going through high school for me. These albums sound like the long afternoons hanging out with my best friends after school. And I have maybe the first time I heard a song off of this. This is a mix album from the End 107.7 Seattle's alternative radio back in 2004. My brother was working at a station up there and snagged this for me off their shelves. And it's the most 2004 thing in the whole world. It has Tegan and Sarah, The New Year from this album, Gorillaz, Feel Good Inc., Tribute from Tenacious D, Audio Slave, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Brand New, Queens of the Stone Age, The Strokes, Snow Patrol. And so this was very much a soundtrack for that era for me. This album is just so beautiful to me. It's sonically matching what the lyrics are about. And that's something that's kind of important to me because I'm bad at listening to the lyrics very closely or thinking about them deeply. But when the music and the emotion in the way the music is played matches the emotions, like you could listen to Transatlanticism and know it's about longing and missing someone and feeling lonely because that's how it feels. And when an album like catches a mood in such a way, that really puts it on top rank for me. It makes me feel nostalgic. And it's so funny to have an album about nostalgia to feel nostalgic about. And maybe that's just a very unique experience, but maybe that's just a big experience. A ton of my friends my age were so stoked to go see Death Cab and Postal Service. They did a tour recently where they were playing all the old songs, and that was a huge show. And so it's kind of a universal thing to, grow up really loving these songs. It's just music to ruminate to capture those big sad feelings you feel sometimes when I don't know how to feel when I'm feeling just overwhelmingly sad. Like, this is an album I can go sit with and just like feel understood. It's autumnal, it's lonely, it's longing. I can lay on the floor and just let that mood wash over me. Yeah, I think my favorite track is Title and Registration. And it's just about getting caught up in a memory and just ruminating on those what ifs, if I was only a little more whatever. And I don't know, I guess that's a universally relatable feeling because just all the lyrics from this album uh, are just really beautiful and poetic. And yeah, I think discovering it when I was younger, it was one of the first like alternative rock kind of, not as hard. I was listening to a lot of the like metal and grunge stuff my brother introduced me to, but this was one of those first bands where my friends were introducing me to them, and understanding that music can be lyrical and beautiful in that way too. Yeah, it was fun getting to revisit this. I think I'll probably listen to Plans a few more times after this. Like, they're both different, and this is an album that kind of makes sense in the context of the rest of their catalog, because Plans has a more like full sound. There's just more stuff going on. Transatlanticism's so minimalist, and that's what's cool about it. All right, I've rambled on enough about this. I didn't write anything long form this time, so I just had a couple notes and things I wanted to talk about. So thank you for letting me share. There you go, Joe.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, your place looks great. Hello. So Death Cab for Cutie. I was thinking it's one of the dumbest names for a pretty good band that is out there, and that would make a great playlist. Bands with stupid names that you really like. I told my wife we were talking about this record, and she said that's a stupid name. I said, yeah, I could give you a couple more examples. Two of my favorite bands, Drive-By Truckers and the Tragically Hip. Sometimes they just get it wrong, and the talent and quality of the music just transcends the sort of awkward names, I think. That's my opinion. If anybody loves the name, please don't take offense. My brother actually sent me this CD. He burned it off of iTunes and used their stock template for a playlist, which is something I used as well. So there's a little sweet memory of that format and that ability in there. Cassettes were awesome, but it was pretty cool to be able to burn something too. So he sent me Plans, and that's the only record of theirs I've ever listened to. It was that meal was just perfect. I never felt the need to move on. I'd heard The Sound of Settling, but I spent some time listening to this, including on this weekend road trip my son and I took to Columbus to see my brother, and we went to see the Air Force Museum. Anyway, he was on his thing, I was on mine, and I listened to it a lot. I want to say this, I want to be able to level my criticisms without, cheesing anybody off. So I say this with all due respect. My opinions don't mean anything more than, they don't mean shit, So if I say something, I'm actually thinking this is kind of mild. Anyway, I read an old review that mentioned that somebody once described them as one guitar and a lot of complaining. that was pretty funny. I don't know if it's true, but when I hear this record, I think about about the time it came out, I would have been running like hell from these sort of feelings and trying to regroup. So so his angst is something I like felt like I'd already gone through and didn't want to revisit. So I had moved on, and in some ways these songs sort of bored me. And that was the first go round. And the second, I picked up on a lot more of the elements that I liked. The way the music and the new year echoed the theme of the lyrics in a really neat way. That firework explosion theme that Rick had mentioned. For example, or the sound of settling's Smith like feeling. I really thought it had that sort of bounce of some of the classic Smith singles, and that same sort of hyper self-awareness that I have a little difficulty connecting with. But the thing about the sound of settling is that it emerges that some of this stuff might not have to be taken so seriously, or maybe it's more like the music or the it's so painful that you've got to laugh at it, which comes in in line with a great tradition that's I think of as sort of this Leonard Cohen thing. Like, if you can't listen to Leonard Cohen and not laugh at the depth of his misery, which I think he did as well, while being deadly serious about it at the same time, you're missing half the fun. I also, this comes to mind that the heaviness of theme, like Red House Painters or Sun Kill Moon. Sometimes you find laughter in these very serious subjects. Musically, I like the record fine. It's hard to really nail them down at all. I heard some Smiths. I mean, I don't. It's kind of boring to just try to pick who they sound like, but sometimes things emerge. The Smiths, XTC was a fun kind of. There were XTC references in there, which is odd for that band not to be referenced more. They're like first generation, hugely influential, I think, but I think maybe there's a just sort of a gap. Anyway, we're not talking about XTC. So I like Plans a lot. Transatlanticism was good, and I can see what the fuss is about, but I didn't think there was really room in me for one more Death Cab for Cutie record. That's my take. I like Plans a lot.
I like Plans too, or at least what I've heard of it. Hey everybody, Greenberg here. I knew who Death Cab for Cutie was, but they seriously got on my radar back in the days of the OC, and I'm not ashamed to admit I am a fan of the OC. I based my life on the teachings of Seth Cohen, but I didn't actually hear Death Cab until I got Sirius XM and got to hear a couple of tracks off of Plans, like Soul Meets Body and Crooked Teeth, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. So fast forward to now, and I will confess, a lot of times I wait until the last minute to listen to our album, which means that I gave Transatlanticism its first spin yesterday, gave it 2 more spins today. Fun fact, in 2004, a year after the record dropped, Debts was an actual radio show, and I was at WHFR in Dearborn, Michigan. I was also the promotions director. Somebody from the Royal Oak Music Theater calls and says, do any of your hosts want to give away tickets for Death Cab? And I go to the staff. I'm like, who wants tickets to give away for Death Cab? And every hand in the room shot up. And those who couldn't give the tickets away got to go for free. So I feel happy to be part of that exchange. Getting back to this record, first spin, I thought, okay, this is nice. You know, it's pleasant enough, but I knew I had to give it another shot. So I listened again this morning, took some notes about some of the lyrics, and then gave it a third listen when I was on my afternoon walk. And I take long ass walks. We're talking like 6 or 7 miles. So here's the notes that I have. The first thing that jumped out on me, title and registration, which I think is a great title. And for me, it struck me as I love when you've got a song that kind of starts with a conceit that could also be like part of a stand-up bit. And this, to me, starts as the kernel of a universally truthful yet potentially hacky stand-up bit. And then it takes a sharp left turn into the exploration of an emotionally painful end of a relationship. Expo 86. I got strong Sisyphus Groundhog Day vibes, especially from the following lines. Sometimes I think this cycle never ends. We slide from top to bottom and we turn and climb again. Love the cadence of that. And then the other line, I am waiting for you to flee the scene as if you held in your hand the smoking gun. So I feel like that first stanza captures the Sisyphus, the rolling the rock up the hill only to do it over again. And then the second line, which I quoted, that to me speaks to the whole Groundhog Day of like, I've been in the scene before. I'm waiting for you to flee the scene. So I like that as a songwriting device. The Sound of Settling, which is one of the few songs that I had heard before listening to the album, the other one being The New Year. And hands down, one of the best pop songs written about getting in one's own way. And I get where he's coming from, because to me, the idea of settling, I'm like, there's things you settle for. They're like, okay, you don't have the roasted vegetables for my veggie bowl. I'll take the falafel. But the idea of settling in life is a frightening prospect. And I think he captures this in a very kind of ironic way. And then I don't know if anybody else caught this, but Tiny Vessels, it had a vampiric feel. It's like the vampiric sadness of finding that the shiny, pretty, hollow object that you've been desiring is more hollow than shiny and pretty. The music, and I can't really say it sounded like one thing or another. You know, it definitely had that early aughts sound. But for me, the music I felt was expansive without being bombastic. And I don't really have too many other thoughts other than to say I need to do a better job of listening to the albums earlier in the month. And I think that this is an album that if I give it more spins, I'm going to like it more. But I know that if I had just stopped after one spin, I would have given this a half-ass review. So I'm glad I took the time to give it a couple more spins today, and I'm looking forward to giving it more spins in the future. So with that, back to you, Andy. I think Andy went to the loo.
Hey, no, I just couldn't figure out where the button was to put myself back on the screen. I'm Andrew. I'm the guy that started this thing. We started it with end of the year mix in 2020. And we had several members that first time that haven't come back. And then we've added more of you along the way. But it was the 2020 best of the year, pandemic year, that really got us going. And being as already 30 minutes after the hour, we're going to jump right into our second half. So thank you for the comments. Anybody listening to this later on Facebook Live or YouTube or Facebook Live archives, YouTube Live archives, please put your comments right there in the comment place about this wonderful album, or about the Music Nerds group in general. We're so grateful that we get to do this for each other, and we just kind of, as an added bonus, share it out there with the interwebs. We haven't really promoted the thing very aggressively, so we just get whoever drops in, and we're always so grateful to have you here. So I've got several things I want to talk about, but I'm not going to go into too much depth as far as my listening goes, because I've got probably 15 or 20 albums that I could talk about just since we were together the last time. So I'm just going to talk about a few highlights of my recent listening. People who know me would not be surprised to know that I like the cosmic American music. The cosmic American music, of course, descends from Graham Parsons and the Flying Burrito Brothers. And in the cosmic American music is the Grateful Dead. It is the intersection of country, folk Americana, and kind of psychedelic rock, or kind of expansive reverb-drenched rock. And if I was going to go to the side of American music that was the most kind of, cosmic for me personally in the last 20 years, the top two groups I would mention would be the Flaming Lips and My Morning Jacket. And I have found an album that just came out a few weeks ago called Everyone is Everyone, that to me fits right there squarely with the Grateful Dead, the Flying Burrito Brothers, and with My Morning Jacket and Flaming Lips. And I know those are high words. This is a cat out of San Antonio, Texas, who can tell you the difference between being a member of the San Antonio music scene versus the Austin music scene. And he's very partisan to the San Antonio music scene. On his very weird looking website, Garrett with 2T's caps.com, looks like something that was made with Netscape Explorer around 1998. And I'm afraid too of my connection here doing these. I need to get faster internet. I always think my speed is about dial up sometimes on this thing. He says about himself on his website, I am a bad mofo. He says in the third person, but I bet he wrote it. GTC is a bad mofo. He makes cowboy kraut with his band NASA Country and also lots of Tex-Mex rock and roll. He is San Antonio's resident cosmic country gonzo honky tonk weirdo freak. And so if you could imagine really expansive sonic cosmic psychedelic music with a little bit of Texas twang, you're going to get around to Garrett T. Capps. This is going to be one of my top albums of 2024. It's called Everyone is Everyone, and I want everyone who's listening to this to go and listen to it at the streaming service of your choice. Just dropped last Friday, Joy Adelukun out of Nashville, Tennessee, has a brand new album, and I should have wrote this down. The name is slipping me. I'm going to pull it up right here for us here, just on the fly. I saw Joy for the first time this last summer in Massachusetts with my brother at a festival up there. It's called Observations from a Crowded Room. One of the things that Joy does in this record is she hooks in spoken word reflections on the passage of her life. And this is very much I'm a Black gay woman living in Nashville, and there's Proud Boys marching in the streets, and I don't know how I feel about that. And I'm a performer who needs to get high on weed every time I perform, but the weed isn't working like it used to. She's got a great song on here called Drugs that reminds me of that great track, The Drugs Don't Work, because it's basically what the song's about. A lot of these feel more pop than country. They are sing-alongs, they're hook heavy, but they're deep in the questions and the meaning and the frustration of becoming famous as a young person and collaborating with the likes of Chris Stapleton and hanging out, as she said in one podcast, getting to hang out with Dave Matthews, and even smoking weed in Joe Biden's private dressing room in the White House when she was invited to sing at the White House. This record, I think I've listened to it like 6 times since it came out. And that's how many times. I was thinking about what Scott said about 3 times being the charm or whatever. With this, I've got to listen to an album more than once for it to start to really work for me. And I'm very much interested in this brand new album by Joy Adelukun. So those are my 2 new release things, the Garrett T. Capps and Joy I can't say her name, Crowded Room. But there's so many others that are deep in the list. But something happened to me the other day that people have been trying to get to happen to me for a few years. I've had students, I've had colleagues, mostly students, I've had friends. I've even talked to Rick about this over the years, but I've refused, almost out of like, not a thought out refusal, just out of like a gut. No, thank you. I'm good. Not listened to Taylor Swift. And the other day, a student of mine referenced one of her songs from Folklore in his paper. It was actually a poem that he wrote for my class. And so I was like, I got to go listen to this song. This Is Me Trying. It was an unbelievable song. And then I got into the ever more Folklore Arc, which are the two records where they collaborated with The National. And if I think of these as albums by The National with guest vocals by Bon Iver and the guy Matt Berninger from The National, if I think about these as National albums, as kind of alternative albums on which Taylor Swift is the featured songwriter and vocalist, it started to wrap my mind around this. And Rick said this is the pandemic record where she brought in the dads, and I definitely feel like a Taylor Swift dad in relation, or grandpa, even in relation to my students. And I've gotten through Evermore and Folklore multiple times now, and her lyrics are unbelievable. The music there is pretty good. It doesn't grate on my nerves like some pop music does. And I would say the Swifties are onto something. I'm really grateful that I have so many Swifties in my life at my day job. And because I do a sorting hat for this, I just grab your names out of a hat. Scott gets to go again.
I gotta say, Andy, we are in the middle of a pop renaissance, and I am not like a Taylor scholar, but I'm coming around. Anti-Hero is a great song, but that's neither here nor there. Before I dive into my stack of things I've been listening to, I want to call out the music from the new Marvel television show on Disney Plus, Agatha All Along. The music written by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez, best known for writing music from Frozen. And at the heart of this series, which I love, Catherine Hahn, Aubrey Plaza, Zashir Zameda, Patti LuPone. But at the heart of this is a song called Down the Witch's Road. And throughout the series, and they're about to drop episode 6 this week, I think. But throughout the series, you hear different versions of this song, and it's a great song. There's an a cappella version that's just very kind of Baroque and choral that I absolutely love. But they topped it last week when they did another version by Japanese Breakfast with Jack Antonoff. So I highly recommend the show. Listen to every version of Down the Witch's Road, and I dare you to not sing it to yourself absentmindedly. Let's dive into the stack of things I've been listening to as of late. Alan Sparhawk, White Rose is My God. Alan is the former front person of the Minnesota slowcore band Low. I absolutely love Low. I can't claim I'm a Low scholar, but I got into Low over the last 10 years, and just I'm sad that I never got to see them and never will get to see them, because Alan's wife and bandmate, Mimi Parker, passed away from ovarian cancer about 2 years ago. And this is his first recording since then. And it's him and his kids playing around with electronic instruments and burying his vocals in effects, sounding kind of like the best possible use of auto-tune. And from what I've heard, these are not necessarily songs that he wrote to express his grief, but him just kind of fucking around and finding out with, electronic instruments and just kind of bonding with his kids. So it's interesting. I recommend you give it a couple of spins. Also, and I know Joe's going to be on board with this, new album from Steve Wynn, Make It Right, is the companion piece to his newly published memoir. And Steve used to be the principal songwriter of the Paisley Underground band, the Dream Syndicate, and a brilliant solo artist in his own right. I've had the pleasure of meeting the guy a bunch of times. He is a mensch among men, a master storyteller. Got to see him do his songs and stories evening last week at a small club here in Charlotte. He read excerpts from his book. He played Dream Syndicate songs. He played covers by Big Star and the Velvet Underground, and it was just a delightful evening. And the record's pretty rock solid. I recommend that. And for those of you who like supergroups, the Hard Quartet. The most notable person on here is Stephen Malkmus of Pavement, along with people from the bands Chavez, Cairo Gang, and the Dirty Three. It's good. It's fun. There's a song on here called Earth Hater, which is the guitar hook of the year. Another thing on here called Rio Song. Check out the video. It is a shot-for-shot homage to the Rolling Stones, Waiting for a Friend. It's a bit long. It's 14 songs. You know, I've given it a handful of spins, but there's some that definitely pop out. So there's that. And then we've got a new album from Dawes called Oh Brother. And they didn't really make a big deal out of announcing this. They just kind of quietly dropped a couple of pre-release tracks maybe about a month ago, but it's always good to have new Dawes music. I've only listened to it once. There's 9 tracks, and the 2 pre-release tracks are rock solid. There's another one that has stuck with me. I need to spend more time with this. I need to create more hours in the day. And I can kind of say the same thing for the final album from Japan Droids out of Vancouver, BC. Their final album called Fate and Alcohol. I've listened to it once, like it, need to listen to it again. But this album carries the baggage with it that, for me, their second album, Celebration Rock, is one of those records that I could use as a substitute for caffeine. It is an album that makes me feel like I am 17 years old. And to me, and this is my problem, when I find an album I love, sometimes nothing else by that artist or that band will live up to it. And that's all on me. I'm the problem. It's me. And I've only listened to this once, need to spend more time with it. So we'll come back to that. And then finally, the most underrated Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album, Long After Dark, just got a reissue. As you can see, it's still in the shrink wrap. I haven't had a chance to listen to it. I love the album, so I can recommend it. So what I haven't listened to is the disc of bonus tracks, which includes their original version of Ways to Be Wicked, the first recorded, officially released version of that from Load and Justice, whose first album in several years drops later this week. But I digress. 3 of my all-time favorite Petty songs are on this record: Straight into Darkness, Deliver Me, and Change of Heart. And it's also the record that contains You Got Lucky. So that's what I've been listening to. Back to you.
Scott, thank you. That's always a stellar list, and bonus points for throwing in the anti-hero lyric. That was awesome. I'm not going to say anything about it because Andrew did a fantastic job, but I will co-sign on the Joy Alodakun recommendation. I have a feeling the more I get into that album, the higher up it's going to make its way into my year-end list as a late arrival. I've been listening to a few things recently that from across different genres. Billy String's major label debut, Highway Prayers, is getting my attention. I'm not a big bluegrass fan, although I don't dislike it. But there's just something about Billy Strings, the energy that he brings, the kind of jam band-ish bluegrass frenzy that he has. But this album around Highway Prayers, which ends with one of the most interesting, it's basically a gospel song about the NASCAR idol Richard Petty, and it's not sacrilegious. It's done well. It's catchy. It truly is a gospel song. Very interesting album. I'm just one listen into the new Fantastic Negrito album, Son of a Broken Man, and every album I have encountered of his is just a whirlwind of funk, R&B, country, soul, roots goodness. And this one, I sent Andrew a link to the closing song, which was This Little Light of Mine, with the message, this is church. And it truly is. It's a wild Pentecostal up and down church, but it's certainly a great album, and I'm looking forward to more spins of that. My wife came back from her most recent trip with a gift for me. It's not a brand new album, but it's a 2022 live album by Neil Young called Noise and Flowers. He's backed by the Promise of the Real, Lucas Nelson's band. It's just some of his traditional hits all the way back from his first album up until now. Neil is great live. It was a nice little substitution for the way that Neil bailed on Andrew and I and all the other attendees at Bourbon and Beyond this year at Louisville. Finally, I want to mention a concept album that a good friend of mine here in town just put out. His name is Eric Coomer, and the album is called American Polemic, and it is a concept album that seeks to speak to, in the midst of, the craziness of our hyper real, social media infused socio-political moment. It's equal parts Steve Taylor from the 80s and 90s new wave CCM, contemporary Christian music influences, as well as the industrial feel and buzz of U2's Achtung Baby, with a little Rage Against the Machine energy in there. I don't listen to a lot of contemporary Christian music these days. I find a lot of it just frankly uninteresting, but this is a fascinating creative album, and I just wanted to give Eric a shout out. And those are my recommendations for this month.
Yay. I'm so excited to make my playlist of all these excellent albums and listen to them for the rest of the month. I got a couple new EDM albums and one new rock album I want to shout out. The rock album is by The Offspring. I got to see them at Shaky Knees Festival earlier this year, and it was just a joyful experience. They're just so much fun. They don't take themselves too seriously. They have, fun punk songs that we've loved since the mid-90s, and they're still doing it, and they're still writing fun punk songs. And the single off their new album, the album's called Supercharged, and the single that just is such a delight is called Come to Brazil. And it's just a song about how awesome their fans in Brazil are. It's about their fans demanding they come to Brazil, and the song ends with a punk rock ole 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 soccer chant. It's such a delight. It makes me happy. I love The Offspring. And okay, other albums. I'm super stoked on this artist called Casablanca. It's spelled with a K. It's a duo. They're playing more like techno house stuff, but it's on the same record label as Above and Beyond, one of my favorite artists that plays more uplifting trance music. So it's very vibey. I wish I was better at describing EDM music to get you guys more into it. But take my word, the new Casablanca, the album's called Higher Resolution, is extremely good. The other album I'm super stoked on is by Rufus Du Sol. They were my favorite for a second 2 or 3 years ago with their previous album. And this new album hits hard too. There's a couple songs that are just really fun. They're more on just the popular, listenable side. I think EDM is kind of coming into their era of just being mainstream, listenable, what people want to hear. And Rufus Du Sol is right down the middle like that. And speaking of popular EDM artists, Fred again is huge right now, and kind of suddenly so. His new album 10 Days came out recently, and I guess he got big because he was doing stuff on stage with Skrillex and Fortet, and that was really cool stuff. We love those guys, and I enjoy this new album from him. It's just cool and vibey, and I would recommend that. My last shout out is first just a shout out to house shows. we love house shows. Some of my friends are just so fed up of trying to get their bands to play out at venues in Nashville. And maybe it's just an everywhere thing, or maybe it's just my friend group being fed up with the specific venues we've been trying to do shows at. But I feel like we're working towards a moment of just making our scene a little tighter. And I like that. So my friends in the Dangerous Method, they're doing their best to open up their house to shows. And I got to do a show there not so long ago. But more excitingly, my buddy Max, who I think is listening tonight, so hi Max, they're opening up their house as a house show venue. It's a really cool space in East Nashville. It's called the Bird Nest. And the best show I've seen there so far is a Nashville artist called Quinn Hill. And she is a trans woman that lives here in Nashville. I think she works at the Bell Court. And these songs will knock your socks off. They are about her experience coming out, and it's very personal. It's really fun songs. And she made a cassette tape, like cool stuff. And yeah, that was a super fun show because Pujol opened for her. Daniel Pujol is a Nashville guy, and I remember him playing like garage punk back in the like Infinity Cat era when like Jeff the Brotherhood was the biggest thing. Maybe that was just my experience in the 2010s, but yeah, part of that music scene. And now he's doing cool folksy spoken word stuff. So shout out to house shows. If you want to check out the Bird Nest, they're on Instagram, thebirdnest.nash, and their next show's coming up on November 10th. We're doing a mutual aid benefit show, and on the 16th we're doing synth night. We have some friends that do like vibey synth cool stuff. You don't want to miss it. So yay house shows, yay music. That's all I got.
Have you noticed that I successfully unmuted in a timely manner before I started blabbing? While I'm sitting here, I'm listening to y'all's great and thoughtful comments. I often react and have thoughts about them and want to. I know that's what this little private chat box is for, but it's sort of inadequate somehow. Anyway, it's great stuff. But I need to chide you all. How does nobody mention The Cure? What the hell? I think the world is a much better place with Robert Smith and The Cure making records. There's something very comforting about their brand of misery. There's 2 singles from their album, Songs from a Lost World, out for streaming. The album comes out on November 1st. I think they're most excellent Cure songs. They're very Cure. They're not going to change your world. They're exactly what he's been doing for years. It sounds really good. Smith is also a righteous dude. I don't know if you all have been hip to how he priced his last tours. I think he does. He sets aside a dog choking mother load of $25 seats. So that's part of his deal. He also won't do dynamic pricing, and he chides everybody else for dynamic pricing. He just he's a lone voice in the darkness about that. And I love that. I've never been a huge fan. I've seen them a couple times. I thought they were fantastic live, but I've always liked them, and I'm glad their new stuff is out. That's on heavy rotation. Parquet Courts have a new record, Sympathy for Life. It's their Police record, I think. I love the single "Walking at a City Pace." It's not like the Police. It's like Ragged Police. If they somehow, I don't know, that band has such so many like personalities. This one is different. Like many of the others, and it's a lot of fun. I look to them for fun. I went down a Sun Ra rabbit hole. Really, that just means I've been listening to Nuclear War over and over again, and I don't know if I brought this up several times, but it's such a amazing song. It's just laughing at the deepest fear. Often I got to look to my Spotify likes to remember what I've been listening to a lot. And there's a song called Timeless by Ibrahim Malouf, Tumani Diabati, who and a number of other names who I'm not familiar with, but it's a wonderful song that's on Spotify. I must mention the DBs, who's this is one of my all-time favorite records, and I had it on vinyl. I might have had it 2 times on vinyl. I don't believe it ever came out on CD, but the DB's second record, I talked about the first one, Repercussion. Oh, they got to blur that. I don't know how to unblur that, but you get the idea. It's I don't know when I can't even remember when it came out, but I had it in high school. And it's been one of my favorites ever since. It's just a fabulous literate pop record from one of the great unsung bands in the 80s and 90s and noughts even. And this is it. It's like blue and yellow sunburst sort of thing. And I love it, and I'm so happy to get it today. I listened to that one a lot on my drive to Ohio with my son. I was happy for it to appear. Some of their stuff is just not out there for streaming, and I don't think they've done anything that isn't mostly great to fabulous. I like them a lot. No. What else do I have? I only budgeted one piece of paper and it's all filled up, and that might be it. I saw Drive-By Truckers this last week. I'm going to finish off soon. They were playing their Southern Rock Opera record, but the interesting thing they did was intersperse several other songs during the set. It was great rock. It was great rock music. I had a blast. They are reissuing their a 10th anniversary edition of their Brilliant American Band, and it's got a bonus track, a live version of Ramon Cassiano, which was written by Cutie. Fabulous song about the birth of the NRA and what it means today. It's a really unusually esoteric, kick-ass fucking rock song, which is sort of their stock and trade. And I love them too. That's all I got.
Speaking of the Drive-By Truckers, they spent a lot of time in Athens, Georgia, and Jason Isbell used to be in the Drive-By Truckers. And a couple of months ago, Jason Isbell inducted REM into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. And then a couple months after that, Jason Isbell and Michael Stipe did a acoustic duet as a awareness, get out the vote awareness rally for the Harris Walls ticket. And so at this year's Ryman residency by Jason Isbell in the 400 unit, he closed every night with a different REM song. He actually repeated Losing My Religion once, but he played Losing My Religion, Driver 8, The One I Love, Fall on Me, Finest Work Song, Man on the Moon, and I'm forgetting one. Oh, and It's the End of the World as You Know It, and I Feel Fine. So anyway, all of our worlds are converging. In that very Ryman room, Joe, you'll be with me in a month, exactly a month. Joe's going to be in Nashville with me, seeing the Drive-By Truckers again.
I can't wait. It's going to be a blast.
So speaking of DBT, I highly recommend y'all checking out the not this week's, but last week's episode of Sound Opinions. Patterson Hood sits down with Jim and Greg, and it was just one of the more engaging episodes. It's just, I learned things about Southern rock opera that I didn't know. So just for the diehard fan, it's an hour well spent.
Any final shots? Amy, do you have an album for us? Amy, can you tell us? Can you do the big reveal?
I think so. It's been tough because I don't want to repeat like the same year as my last pick, which was around 2000, 2001. And then we just did one from the mid-aughts, but the mid-aughts is where like all my favorite albums came out. So I think this is my opportunity to do my 90s grunge pick. And I think y'all are familiar with the works of Pearl Jam, so maybe that's a little much, but maybe Mother Love Bone, and we can talk about the origin of Pearl Jam. And yeah, someone's excited. I'm excited. We'll see you next month for Mother Love Bone.
So I'm doing the next semester, I'm doing the American mixtape on the 90s. My whole American mixtape class is going to have a 90s theme, and I need to get more immersed in it. And I have a current student right now whose absolute favorite band of all time, they're like 19-year-old from Chattanooga, African-American engineering major with like crazy dreadlocks. They're punk AF, and their favorite band of all time is Dinosaur Jr. And they're also really into all kinds of other 90s and 80s stuff. And anyway, yeah, so I can't wait for Mother Love Bone. It's a perfect choice, Amy.
Excellent.
What's the name of the record again?
Self-titled.
And that is that the only one they put out?
Yeah. Wait till next month. I'll give you the whole history.
We're over an hour. So I've been teacher on the radio. That's Amy Rock. We've had Scott Greenberg from Charlotte, Joe from just up from the city of New York into the upstate of New York, barely upstate of New York, and Rick Quinn out of Nashville, Tennessee. Hopefully we'll have my co-cook villain, Gus Creeder, back next month when we discuss Mother Love Bone. We'll set the date. We'll send you guys an invite. Follow us on Facebook, each of us individually on Facebook, and you'll hear about it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming along to the show.